Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a tutorial to share with you today. We are going to be making mozzarella cheese using this kit by Gardener's Pantry. We picked it up from gardeners.com. Some more information about this kit as well as troubleshooting tips down in the description box below. It comes with everything you need in order to do this project except for a pot and a stove. I'm getting some water heated up right here because we need to sterilize our cheesecloth that comes in the kit. But first we want to soak it in a bowl of water. So we're going to soak it for a few minutes and put that aside while the water boils. Once the water is boiling, we're going to go ahead and put that cheesecloth in there and we're going to boil it for a few minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to take that water and we're going to water our plants outside, trying to be environmental, and this is a great use for that leftover water. So it's been a few minutes, so we're going to take this out and let it cool down, and in the meantime, we're going to work on the rest of this project. We're going to cut the rennet into quarters because you only need a very small amount. Now, if your cheese doesn't set properly, you may need a little bit more. Later on in this tutorial, I'm going to share with you some of those tips. Okay, you can also store that in the freezer when you're done with it. It's going to last a really long time. We're also going to put our cheese salt and our citric acid in some mason jars so it's easier to use and to store. Next, we're going to dissolve 1.5 teaspoons of citric acid in a half cup of water. You want to get this all dissolved. Once that's dissolved, we can go ahead and put that in our large pot that we're going to be using in order to heat up our milk. This is pasteurized milk. You're going to have better results if you use raw milk. You're going to have better results if you use full fat milk. In some cases, you can use milk powder to help the process along. You want to heat your milk up to 90 degrees. This happens fast, so pay attention. And once it's 90 degrees, then you can move on to the next step, and that is adding your rennet to this mixture. You can see that there's already some separation that occurs when you add the citric acid to the milk. At this point, you want to stir for 30 seconds, making sure that that rennet is all incorporated. Set the timer for 5 minutes and leave it alone. Don't touch it. After 5 minutes, you can see if it's set, and our first attempt was kind of a failure. Now, this is salvageable, but not so much with the project that we were doing in order to make mozzarella cheese. We went ahead and strained it, and you can actually strain those curds out and you can still use them. There are a lot of recipes that you can use this for, but for our purposes, we were just going to try this again. But we were able to still salvage all of the whey. Now here are the curds, and it was really hard to use at this point, so we put them aside, and in the meantime we took all of that whey and we put it back into our milk carton, and we used it in order to make some dough the following day. Okay, so we bought another gallon of milk and we're going to try this again. Went ahead and did everything the same, and it was able to set a little bit better, in part I believe because we added a little bit more rennet. But the last time I did this several years ago, we used raw milk and the results were awesome. It worked really well. And when we were cutting the curds, it was more like jello and not so separating the way it is right now. So once you separate all of these and you cut it up, you want to heat this back up to 110 degrees. And in a separate pot, you want to heat up water up to 185 degrees. I'm going to transfer a little bit of those milk curds into this strainer because you want to heat up the milk curds to 135 degrees in order for them to stretch and melt. And this is going to help stretch the milk proteins and turn it into mozzarella. It is hot, so be careful, but you do want to work with it so that you can start to stretch it. And the milk proteins are going to stretch at 135 degrees. So you do want your water a little bit hotter in order for your milk curds to warm up to that proper temperature. So now comes the fun part, but it is a little bit frustrating at first, and that is to stretch your cheese. And at first it kind of tears, but you want to keep working it, and you may need to heat up your milk curds again in order to get them to the proper temperature so that you can continue to stretch them. It's similar to stretching taffy if you ever made taffy, but it doesn't stretch right away. So you can see that I'm gently working with this, gently stretching it a little bit at a time. And at a couple of points in this process, I put it back into that hot water, which I kept nearby, so I could dunk it in a little bit. It sort of melts the milk proteins and then allows you to stretch it and pull it and bring it back together, and you continually do this until it's nice and silky. Now I'm showing you the entire process. It took about a full 5 minutes to go from start to finish to get them nice and smooth, but it was really satisfying once you get it to the point where you can actually stretch it right here, and then you can kind of double it over and continue to stretch it. You can turn it into a ball or you can braid it. There's a lot of things that you can do. Now I didn't salt it at this point. I went ahead and just did this whole process thinking that it wasn't such a big deal, but once we tasted it, it wasn't all that flavorful, so definitely salt it. And then you just place it into some cool water so that it can set. All right, so you can use that cheese salt in order to salt your cheese. You can do as much as you need. My son here is just sprinkling a little bit onto that cheese, and then he is going to do this. This is super easy. My son is 12 years old, and I think that you could do this with children as young as 6 or 7. It's a lot of fun. Now, you might want to get it stretched a little bit before the kids help out if they're finding that part frustrating. Now you can also turn it into a ball. You can make smaller balls. Whatever you're going to do, when you're done stretching it and cutting it, you do want to store it in some cool water that helps set it. And that's also the way that we stored it in the refrigerator. So my son here is working on another batch. This made several small batches. We found it was easier to work with about a handful of curds rather than the entire pot. And in the end, it didn't make as much cheese as we expected, but we really did like the process. And I also liked being able to have the whey in order to make bread, which turned out amazing. And you can find that recipe also in the description box below, as well as links to those videos where we're just making bread without the whey, but it's the same recipe and it tastes amazing. All right, so he's just gonna set that little twist in that water, and then that's about it. All right, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to check the description box below for more information as well as troubleshooting tips. If you enjoyed this video, I left a couple other food tutorials here for you to check out. You can tap on the screen. If you want more information about the products that we use, you can find it on my website at pepperandpine.com. And don't forget that if you want to see what we're up to on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at pepperandpine.